had similar visions together, and so we met there, and I went back into my hard drive.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, on my computer's hard drive. Yeah. Mine is pretty useless, but I went back because we were involved in starting at Mosaics conferences. We called it the Northeast Mosaics region, and we kind of took over that thing. And I looked at in 2007, and I didn't see her name there. But I do have actual brochures here. I've got them, and I thought I'd give them to, these are fresh off my hard drive, put it on my inkjet printer. And Nikki was there for those conferences in Lancaster Bible College, and then in Baltimore. And so we were together there. And then in 2010, we were both out in San Diego for the first National Mosaics Conference.
That was my favorite.
That was great. That was
San Diego.
That was. Well, San Diego. It doesn't get any better than that.
You were there.
I was there. I was there with my wife, which made it doubly good. And then just this last November, we were out in Long Beach, California, for the second National Mosaics Conference, and Nikki was there, and so it was a really great time. I'm gonna have to run because I'm scheduled to preach in the second service. I'd really rather listen. I'd rather be here and listen to her, but I'll just have to listen to myself. But have a great time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi. I'll take this off. Well, good morning. Wow, it's really, I was going to say it's great to be here. It's just cool to be here. And the reason it's cool and not just great is because I have been friends with Pastor Jeff for about 5 or 6 years now. And I feel like I know this church just because of the way that he talks about you, and he loves you, and he loves serving you, and he loves serving in this space. So when I walk in, I just kind of feel like, yeah, I kind of got an idea of this church, and it was kind of what I expected in a really good way. So thanks for letting us be here. I just wanted to introduce my crew that I come with. We like to travel in packs. So, never like to do this stuff alone. So right here in the corner, this is my friend Stephen Waddy. Right here. This is David Phillips. And this is David Lerner. We are not brother and sister. Maybe in the Lord. So my name is Nikki, and I just want to share a little bit with you about who I am and a little bit of the journey that I've been on, and then really want to kind of open it up to you guys if you have some questions or something that you want to talk about, nothing's off the table. But right now, I currently am the worship director at a church called Bridgeway Community Church in Columbia, Maryland. And Bridgeway is a large, thriving, multi-ethnic, multicultural congregation. There's about 52 different nations represented in our congregation, and we're still really trying to do our best even to have all of them represented well in our worship and in the life of our church. You know, as the dynamics change, as the cultural dynamics change, it changes every year, so we always feel like we're changing. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a vibrant place to be. Worship is vibrant and hilarious and deep. The reason I say it's hilarious and it's deep is that we'll find moments on stage during worship where we just bust out into laughter, which seems very godly to me. I know it doesn't say it, but sometimes I wonder, like, what made Jesus laugh? Do you ever wonder stuff like that? I know it's not in the Bible, but I'm like, well, if he was fully human, that means he had a sense of humor, right? Like, who made him laugh the most? I don't know, what did it sound like? These are the things I think about when I do my devotions. But we just really enjoy God's presence, and we really enjoy the depth of what God does in the room when we're together as well. The ministry that I lead, the music ministry, is about 175 people right now. We have a choir of about 100 some people that are awesome. And the cool story about that is in 2007, the Bridgeway Choir was about 15 people. It's pretty cool. So now they come on stage and they have like an army, and there's like no space for them, which is pretty cool too. So, but they're just a delight to my heart. And we have some amazing musicians and singers, creative people that are different breeds and all touchy-feely and really weird, just like I am. And so that's why I really, really like to lead them. I did not end up at Bridgeway Community Church looking for a job. In fact, I had never led worship in my life before I showed up at Bridgeway. We've been at Bridgeway for about 16 years. And when we showed up at Bridgeway, it was about 150 people in one service. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And now it's probably about 4,000 people in about 3, 4-ish services. So there's a lot going on. We've experienced a lot of growth in a short period of time. So when my husband and I were engaged to be married, I couldn't wait to bring him to my church. And I didn't grow up in the church. I got saved when I was about 13 under an organization called Young Life, if that rings a bell to anybody. Thank God, because my parents, we were not churchgoers at all, so I had never heard the gospel. We were what a friend of mine calls cheesters. You know, we just show up on Christmas and Easter. We were the cheester family. So we would show up then. And I do remember, like when I was younger, there were times that I remember asking my parents if I could go and like go to church with my grandmother for some reason. Because I think I just wanted to kind of hang out with her because I thought she was cool. But I knew that I would just go to church. But here's the weird thing, is that in all the times, they weren't small, but all the times that I was at church with my grandmother, nobody ever invited me to follow Jesus. Let that like mess with your brain for a minute. It wasn't until my freshman year of high school through Young Life on a retreat where I heard the gospel for the very first time. Okay, that's scary. That's something to consider, right, when we're in ministry, is are we actually taking the opportunity to present the gospel and give an invitation to people? Because I was one of those people that never heard it. So 13, I accept Jesus, and my conversion experience kind of went something like this. Yeah, that makes sense. And I kid you not, that is how my walk with Jesus started. Like, that makes sense. So my mother thought I joined a cult when I got home. And she was very skeptical for a while. So anyway, that's right, I was telling another story. So anyway, my husband and I, right, we were engaged. I couldn't wait for him to come to my church, right? So I invited him to my church and thought he was just going to love it. And so he walked in, and he's looking around, and he said, "We're all black people." And I'm like, and he's white. And so he was so uncomfortable in an all-white church. Now, my family, just the way that I grew up, culture I grew up with, I was so used to us being the only black family in an all-white environment that it was just so normal to me. So the church that I went to, like my very first church experience after I got married, after I was accepted the Lord, well, I went to this large white church, which was the only thing that I ever known. So I'm like, what do you mean you're uncomfortable? This is awesome. All these awesome white people, I love them. But he was very uncomfortable, so I was like, man, I guess we need to find someplace else to go. You know, if we're going to be married and stuff, we should find someplace else to go. So there was a friend of mine who said he found Bridgeway Community Church in the phone book, just sort of randomly, and he visited one morning, and he said, "You need to come visit this church because there are 7 interracial couples here." That was the big sell. There are 7 interracial couples here. And we were like, oh, well, I guess that's where we go then. I guess. Interracial couple church down the street. We all gather. So David and I went and visited Bridgeway. And when we walked through the doors the very first time, we saw 7 interracial couples. And not just like a black guy and a white woman, but we saw people like us. Like, but that time you didn't see a whole lot like David and I. And so honestly, we were just trying to find a place to go, a church to go, where people didn't stare at us as soon as we walked into the room. Because that's sort of the reality for interracial couples, even now. Now, my mother-in-law swears it's because we're just really tall. exactly why it is. Exactly why it is. But you know, it's an interesting experience, even where we live in Columbia, which is an extremely diverse place. I mean, the ethnic diversity is quite enormous there, and even there, when we would go places, particularly churches, because they were mostly ethnically and racially segregated, that we would just feel too out of place. You know, you're kind of too black for the white church. You're not black enough for the black church. You can't really go to the Asian church because you kind of stick out a lot. And you can't go to the Hispanic church because you don't speak Spanish. So, you know, couples like us end up not going anywhere and just kind of sitting home, you know, wondering, well, where will our, you know, if we have children, our little biracial babies, where will they fit? Will they be the only people? You know, who's thinking about them? What about their unique challenges? Blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff, right? So we walk into Bridgeway, we see all these people like us. We hadn't heard the preaching or heard the music, and we were like, we're home. And it was just because of what we saw, which was such a powerful thing. And so we were praying, we're like, Lord, please don't let this church be crazy. Please let the doctrine be right, and, you know, please, Lord, because we like it here, there are people like us here. So thankfully, I mean, it's a crazy church, but the doctrine is sound. Thank you, Lord. And so that was about 16 years ago, and like I said, I had never led worship in my life. I had seen it done, and I didn't want any part of it. I was like, that looks hard. No, I don't want to do that. People don't smile, and they look at you cross-eyed when you're asking to sing. No, I don't want that. I'd always been a singer, but I said, I don't really want any part of that. I had just come out of college, and I'm a trained opera singer, really, because that's what they teach you in college. Talk about culture shock. You're like, I want to be a vocal major, and they're like, here, sing Puccini, and you're like, who? Mendel, who? You know, I mean, we were listening to, you know, the OJs and, you know, smooth R&B, and then it's like, you know, Puccini. What? Italian people? So, so that was a rude awakening in college for me. But anyway, so I just come out of college and figured, you know, I'm gonna try to make it, whatever that means. So anyway, the worship leader at the time, who was a brilliant man, he said, I think you should try to lead worship. Just try it. And I'm like, He's like, no. I really think you should. I think you should try this. I was like, why do you hate the church so much? That you put me in front of them, knowing that I don't want to do this, and I can't do this, right? He's like, no, I think you should do it. You should do it next week. I was like, okay, because I'm submissive. So the following week, I get out there to lead worship or whatever the heck I did. I don't even know what I did, but it was like me and a piano player. And I was like, okay. So I got out there and I led worship. And I came off the platform and the worship leader was standing there and he had this big smile on his face. And he said, here are 3 things that were awesome, that you just did great. He said, and here are 3 things I don't ever want to see you do again. And so that's how he would train me. Is he would schedule me for a week and I would lead worship and I would come off the platform and that's what he would say. And so I find myself even now in my role doing that with my worship leaders, which is kind of funny. But anyway, that's how I ended up leading worship. I led worship as a volunteer at Bridgeway for a long time. Ended up on staff part-time as a pastoral assistant while still leading worship as a volunteer. Still never really wanting to be a worship leader, still sort of like, I don't think so, no. And so in about 2006, 2007, when our previous music director left, they sort of asked me to lead. Sort of. I keep feeling like I tripped and fell into some wonderful ministry opportunity. But our ministry director left, and I was kind of like, I can help. I don't know. That's like the story of my life. Okay. So that's how I'm doing what I'm doing now. And so I get to lead this amazing, diverse group of people. They are seriously a delight to my heart to lead. They make it really easy to lead. They're full of joy. They're just awesome people. And one of the things that was the most powerful to me about my environment at Bridgeway was when I found out that the way that the church was operating, the way that they would plan services and hire staff and put people together and that kind of thing, that it was all intentional. Like it was that the multicultural ministry, the multi-ethnic ministry was all intentional. Like it didn't just sort of happen that way. It wasn't like, somebody moved into the neighborhood and now they're multicultural. It was like, no, we're going to be this. Kind of like, if you were to plant a church and you have your goals and your vision and your core values and all those things that are important, and you say, this is who we're going to be as a church. My pastor, who was the founding pastor, still there now for 22 years, said, we are going to be a multi-ethnic, multicultural congregation. And back at that point, 22 years ago, there were like no churches, not a whole lot, that were even multicultural people worshiping together. And so for me, when I found that out, that someone was thinking about me before they knew me, that I might show up in that congregation, and so when they put teams together and thought about songs and music and languages and all these things, they thought, we might have an interracial couple that shows up this morning, and they probably want to see themselves up there. What an amazing way to feel cared for by a church. It sounds very much like God. There's this crazy passage in Ephesians chapter 1, and it kind of goes like this. Basically, it says that before the world was made, that God adopted us and thought of us and called us his own. And it says this is what he wanted to do because it gave him great pleasure. And I thought, how's that even possible? How can God think about me like that before he even knew me? But I'm thinking, that actually happens all the time, right? If you're going to have a baby, you prepare a room for them and you think about them. You don't even know what they look like yet, right? Even before you decide to conceive, right? You're thinking about, we're gonna bring someone in the world, and they're gonna be ours, and you're dreaming, you're making dreams for them and all that stuff. And I think, okay, now it makes sense to me. And that is essentially how it felt to me when I thought about my church, thinking about someone like me, like that. I had never seen a multicultural group of people worshiping together, ever. I didn't grow up in church, but I've been in church long enough that, I had never ever seen it. So the work that we're doing at my church is intentional multi-ethnic ministry, and it just feels right. I don't ever feel like every day that I just trip and fall into multicultural ministry. It's deliberate, and it's wonderful. And one of the reasons it's so wonderful is because, the climate in our world with racial tensions is high, and it's getting more divisive, and getting more heated, and getting more, there's a lot of misunderstanding, essentially, that's happening, because nobody's listening to anybody, because everybody's yelling, and everybody's scared, right? Everybody wants to be understood, and they're very fearful of losing who they are, because the other person is not affirming it. And the power, I think, that comes from a multicultural, multi-ethnic congregation is, I believe, that in times like that, when, the Trayvon Martins happen, and the Fergusons happen, and all these things happen, I believe that people will be running to churches like ours. And you think about the power in just your community of people, that you have all kinds of people, even in this community, all kinds of people sitting here in your church, where you can sing together and take communion together and be vulnerable together and have conversations around race and culture and put your foot in your mouth and know that the person sitting next to you will forgive you, give you grace, and love you, and not slap you on the hand. That is a powerful thing. And I don't think we need to trip and fall into that. I feel like that's something that I want to pursue, right, in multicultural ministry. So the work that we're doing is we're trying to intentionally think about people. What would honor them culturally? How can we bring things into worship? How can we bring things into small groups? How can we bring things into youth ministry? All of that to intentionally go after somebody. Race and ethnicity, I think, from my opinion, in our culture right now. Every time you hear about it, you only hear about it when there's an issue, right? Like when something happens and then you see, you're like, why is Jesse Jackson on TV? Oh, right, I guess something just happened. That's the only time you see Jesse Jackson. When something awful happened, you're like, oh Lord, something happened again. And then black people do that too, by the way. They're like, no, Lord, please don't call Jesse Jackson again. No, no, they don't help. No. That was the cat out of the bag. I probably should have said that. It's a little secret if you didn't know that, but there were some black people that, please don't call them. Don't call them. They don't help us. No, don't call them. But anyway, you know, you only hear about race and people talk about race when something has gone horribly, horribly wrong, right? But we talk about race all the time at our church, and we talk about it in a positive light because we don't really believe there's anything to fear about it. You know, there's really nothing to fear. And I've actually learned this just being in a multicultural environment. That's the crazy thing about it, is that there's nothing to fear. So the fact that I am 6 feet tall, 6'4" today, praise Jesus. You know, that I'm 6 feet tall, that I have an afro, that I'm an African American woman, that I have a gap in my teeth. That my shoulders are broad, and my arms are long, and my feet are big, and all of that stuff, and my skin is brown, that God did that too. That when God was weaving me in my mother's womb, that it wasn't like that was an accident, right? That He put all these gifts in me, all these spiritual gifts in me, right, on purpose. And that for some reason He was like, yeah, I don't know what race she's gonna be. Right? Like he didn't miss that detail. And I rejoice in that. I used to not think that way. I do now. I rejoice in how I've been made because I know that all of it is a gift. All of it's an extension. You know, if you're a white person in this room, it's the same thing. You shouldn't feel ashamed of how God made you. God made you like that for a reason. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the gifts that you have and even some of the privileges that you have, that they just are what they are. Don't judge them. They just are what they are. Think about them as a powerful gift to be used through Christ. Right? This is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I was talking to a group of pastors, primarily white pastors, and this issue of white privilege kept coming up, and people get real nervous around that term. I don't feel nervous around that term, just so you know. I actually think like everything else, that privilege, no matter if it's white privilege or black people have it too, depending on the context. That anything that's been given to us, if used properly and used through Christ, is a really powerful thing. I mean, think about this, that when you are a white person in this country and you go out, somebody said go out. If you go out and go down the street to a community and just go and serve them, let's say there's a underprivileged, let's say African American community, and you go and you serve them. Well, if I go and serve them, that's one thing. If you go and serve them, that's you taking your privilege and letting Christ use it. Because here's the great thing about this privilege thing, you don't have to. You could probably live your entire life and not jump into the culture of someone else as a white person and live and die and be fine and never have to do it. You don't have to worry about not getting a job or anything like that, right? But you can do that. But the thing is, when you take that privilege and you do something with it and you don't have to, that is where the power lies. It's the same thing with black people, where, someone to sit with a group of people during a heated time, like a Ferguson or something like that, and just say, somebody bring your questions. Just bring it, if you don't understand, let's just sit around and ask questions. Like, that's using your privilege. Your non-white privilege. Because in that context, you have privilege too, right? It's something that you can offer. It's a gift that you have to give. And so I share all that with you just to say that when you're in a multi-ethnic church and multi-ethnic ministry, every everything you have culturally is a gift to be shared. Like, there's so many people that are in segregated churches right now that they don't have what you have. You all have gems just because you are doing life in community with one another, right? You understand things that people in monocultural communities don't understand. You all can actually minister to people that are just like you in a powerful way that other people can't. So the reason I'm bringing this up is just, sometimes when you're in it, you don't always see it. But I just want to let you know that because you're in a multi-ethnic, intentional community, it's one of the most beautiful things. It's one of the most beautiful provisions I think that God can give us. And it's life-changing. It's life-changing for everybody, hopefully. So, you still with me? Okay, good. good. Can somebody tell me what time it is? Just want to make sure I'm on it.
About 12:15.
12:15. Oh, look at that. Cool. So, I'll stop right there, I guess. And just say, that's where I come from. And that is where a lot of music that you'll hear, if you're coming to a concert tonight, a lot of the music that you hear flows out of my experiences and my community that I've come out of, and the things that I long for to happen, things that I long to see, and the great people that I get to do it with. So, does anybody have any questions at all about anything that I said? Yes.
Is the church located in a community, in a multicultural community?
It is. Columbia is an extremely diverse community of people. It was planned that way. It was actually a planned community of people. Because the guy who planned it wanted to see different types of people living together and doing life together, doing work together. It's kind of an interesting thing. The crazy thing is that there's Bridgeway and there's one other church, City of Hope Church, that exist in Columbia that are multi-ethnic. Every other church is segregated by race. So even with that's why I'm saying, even in a community that is diverse, most multicultural, multi-ethnic churches do not just happen because people tend to flock to each other. It's just human nature. We kind of flock with people that are like us. Especially when it comes to church, you figure a lot of people, if they're in a work world where they have to give up a lot of their preferences, and they might be even in cultures that make them feel a little uncomfortable, the last place you want to go feel uncomfortable is church. Which seems a little strange, since it seems like the gospel is all about getting us uncomfortable. And, you know what I mean? And out of who, we would like to be. Like if we're on, we just like to hang out and what we like to be, rather than who God wants us to be. And so that's usually what happens. So there's only 2 of us right now that are intentionally multi-ethnic churches, which is interesting. Yeah. Yes.
You said you have 50 people represent nation. Do you have Filipino? I'm from there.
A lot. Yes. Yes, lots of Filipinos. They're probably, I was going to say they were probably the largest Asian group, but actually I don't think that's true. I think Koreans are probably our largest Asian group, and Filipinos are probably our second largest Asian group.
Do they sing?
Yes. In fact, I have a guy leading worship this morning, and I'm not there. He's Filipino. His name is Tyrone. I kid you not. I know, you're picturing black dude, hoodie, some Nikes on. I kid you not. His name is Tyrone, and we actually make a joke about it on stage quite a bit. And people laugh. That's why I say we talk about race all the time, and we make a lot of jokes about it on stage. Because sometimes I'll introduce the worship team and just say, this is Susan, and this is Dola, and that's Tyrone. And people are like, really? His name is Tyrone. And we laugh, and he's embarrassed, and then we all can laugh, and he goes off the corner and cries. But he's all right. I'm just kidding. But yes, lots of Filipinos. 2 of you here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now my niece.
All right. You represent strong. So anybody have a question about Filipino culture? She's the expert. That's awesome. I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here. Yes, sir.
say it's 52 different cultures or ethnicities at your church, but then you try to be intentional to make folks feel comfortable. So are there certain dominant cultures that you try to make them feel comfortable in? I mean, every week there'd be a different culture represented
Yes.
in a year. So what's the deal there? How do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do y'all hear the question? Okay, good. So our approach to programming and worship in particular is we definitely have what I would first say is like our bridgeway sound. Like I think every church, take ethnicity and race out of it, right? Every church has its culture, right? Kind of a flow, way they go. So we kind of have our church culture, our church flow, which is sort of an infusion of lots of different cultural elements of things. Because I would say culturally speaking, because culture and race aren't always the same thing, right? Culturally speaking, it would be real easy for us as a church as a whole to lean African American culture. And so we actually work really hard because we know that culture is going to exist in general, just naturally. We work really hard to make sure that we're bringing everybody else, culture-wise, into the mix. And that could be just people and staging and staffing and all those teams and things like that. But also music, we're trying to sing it in different languages. I think you guys do that here too, right? When you're singing in different languages. So we're singing in African language. We sing a little bit in Korean. Sometimes we sing in ASL. So we try to incorporate lots of different types of things. Lots of times we'll have prayers in different languages. And, we do what we can to make sure that people feel like they're seen. To make sure that...
Sing ASL.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no noise.
Yeah, they're singing. Yeah, so there's a song that we do. It's actually in English and Spanish, and now ASL. And so the song goes, the chorus goes, I want more, I need more, I want more of you, Jesus. So that's the chorus. And then in Spanish, it's just, quiero más, mucho más, quiero más de ti, Cristo. We sing that. And then, so the choir was singing that song one morning, and I said, well, what if we add ASL to it? And so all we did was, we just taught the congregation the sign for more, which is just, that's it. So, we were singing, so we sang English, and then we sang Spanish, and then the band played. So we did. So we sang in ASL. Yeah. And I mean, there are 5 deaf people in our church. 5. And you should have seen the look on their face to see their choir and their whole congregation learning the sign. You know why? Because they don't have to. Congregation doesn't have to. It's privilege. They don't have to. Nobody gets to learn sign. There's 5 deaf people. Why would we need to learn sign? It's because we love them, right? And because they're part of our community. And when we sing worship, we sing our songs. That's the thing. This is another rabbit trail. But here's the deal about worship that we all need to fight. And I'm going to jump on my soapbox for a minute. Is that worship and music, we're fighting it becoming all about what we like and all about our preference in the sanctuary. And it's subtle. It's a subtle thing. But, when somebody comes up to me in church and says, well, we're going to sing some Fred Hammond, it's preference. Somebody comes to me and says, when are we going to sing Chris Tomlin? Preference. Why don't we sing more hymns? Preference. Right? And so my friend Josh and I joke because we're like, I just want somebody to come up to me who's like 16, okay, 16 years old, and come up to me and say, oh yeah, I just want to know when are we going to sing more hymns? Because Miss Barbara, who's 80, I just think she would love that. So if you wouldn't mind just, I think she would love that. I would love to see her worship. So I'm just going to share that with you. Nobody ever does that. It's like, when are we going to do, when are we going to do my stuff? Right? There's this great scripture in Philippians chapter 2 that talks about, don't only look out for your own interests, but consider others better than yourself, right? So it does say, look out for your own interests and stuff you like too, but man, like work hard in preferring other people above yourself. So when we do ASL, we're preferring the 5 deaf people to the left, right? We're preferring them in that moment because we love them and because we prefer them. And honestly, we all probably have iPads and CD players and stuff like that, or whatever. You can listen to that in the car by yourself. When we're together, we sing our songs, right? Because that's what the Assembly of the Saints is all about. It's about us, right? And so that's really how we honor people. That was a really long answer to a great question. that makes sense? Was I clear? Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Thanks, Ryan. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question to see where mix came from, because I don't think it's very cordial, kind, or appropriate. When people say, "Oh, she's mixed," I said, "What do you mean mixed? Mixed up?"
Then we're all mixed. We are all mixed people. Yeah. I think the question was, where did the term mixed come from? I honestly think people just trying to find language to describe something.
Beautiful blend.
Yeah, and I think as culture evolves and people evolve, our language evolves even more, and we come up with things that are more appropriate. But honestly, I think for most people, they don't even realize that like somebody would be offended by mixed if that's not the culture they live in. See, these are the subtleties of things where we can get angry because somebody called you, "Oh, why'd you call me mixed?" But they're thinking they're actually honoring you because they don't know any better until somebody tells them. Well, I just want to let you know, brother, that in the future, like, I'm cool today and we're cool and I love you, but you should probably use this term, or we prefer this term. And see, that's how I think. That's the advantage I think people in a diverse environment have with each other. There's not, "Why you calling me mixed? What you trying to say?" You don't have to do that with somebody. You look like you would do that. I'm just saying, you don't look like you do that at all. But what I'm saying, that's usually what happens, because we already have a flinch factor. Particularly with non-white people, we got like huge flinch factor. What you mean my hair is soft? What you trying to say? What? You mean it's fuzzy? That's what you're trying to say. It's fuzzy. Using descriptive words. Right? But see that, and then that gives us fear that we don't want to talk about anything at all. Right? So the greatest gift I think you can show somebody is lead them, shepherd them into what would be best for them to learn. So that's a really good question. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if Tony is mixed economically or not, but does Bridgeway have any issues with economic mixture of issues, rich, poor, middle class, and do you address your intentionality into those areas besides this culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, our church is very mixed socioeconomically. We've got leaders of the world in our church, and we've got like the guy that just got out of jail yesterday. And they're sitting next to each other and they're worshiping. And even that culturally is hard, because you could have like a Filipino guy who's a world leader and a black gentleman, and they have the same culture even though they're not the same race, because maybe they're both world leaders, so they kind of get each other. And that actually works better a lot of times than your world leader and your homeless person together, because sometimes they don't even know how to relate to one another because the world's so different. My pastor, I think, I don't know if you guys would agree with me or not, but I think our pastor does really well in his sermons, like every week, of always addressing it somehow, even if it's subtle. He may not say, "And now we're going to preach on how to relate socioeconomically with one another." He may not do that, but he may tell a story or something that happened to him or that kind of thing, or how we can reach out to each other all the time. Does it feel like that to you guys too? So it's always in the language of what we do. And again, we're always talking about how to leverage our relationship with one another. And the coolest thing about being in a socioeconomically mixed church is that people who are doing really well learn from the people who aren't, and they learn how to connect. People who aren't doing really well are now networking with people who are. And so that helps everybody. You know, does that sound weird when I say it? No? Okay, because when I said it made me feel weird for a minute. Because I'm like, is that what I'm trying to say? Yes, it is what I'm trying to say. So, for instance, you know, if you're in a church where everybody is under the poverty level, and, you know, half the congregation is looking for a job, well, nobody has any relationships with anybody that can actually give them a job. You know? So that's tough. So how do you move forward? None of us move forward without relationships, right? Like at all, like at work, at church, whatever. Nobody does anything great by themselves. So if you have that, but then if you've got people who are all doing well, then you never develop compassion for people who aren't. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, that's why segregated churches, no matter the ethnic culture or the socioeconomic, can become very dangerous because you forget that the other people actually exist because you're just not with them. It's normal, right? It's not like something like, oh, these are awful people. It's just normal. That's the thing. And that's why I'm saying the intentionality from what we're doing is so important. That's a great question.
I think the way we present the way the offering is presented, it's not like the church I came from where I'm basically that's one of the things that was beneficial to me when I came to Bridgeway. It'll be 3 years in January that I've been there with my family. When the offering time came around, I didn't get tense. And most people do. It's time for tithes and offerings. Pull the person close, the wallet. But what I like is that it was presented this way. Now comes a time in our service where we're going to give an offering. It's not designed to make you feel obligated. If you happen to give, please give as a form of worship. And I think it puts people at ease because if you don't have money and somebody's telling you in a spiritual sense, if you don't give, you must not love the Lord. And I've heard that. You know, you got to have faith and give. Well, I have faith, but I have no money. Here, it's faith, right? But really, I think that's another part of us being intentional also. So people can come and not feel like they have to give if they don't have. And not feel guilty if they don't have money. You can give of yourself, give of your substance, your time. It's just as valuable.
Yeah, we're always looking for ways to build a bridge, no matter what it is. I mean, obviously, culturally, ethnically is the big elephant in the room always. But with socioeconomics, with gender, with age, all of those things, we're looking for any opportunity to build bridges with people that way. I mean, even down to, I'm the worship leader, I'm the buck stopper at our church. And I know, and I lead worship about 75% of the time. So most of the time the congregation is being led by me. One of the things I've done very intentional is I'm very aware that we don't have a ton of male worship leaders at my church to do it how we do it. Well, what I'm not saying is, well, it's about time that the women get on up there. It's not my attitude. My attitude is it's really important for the fellas in our congregation to be led by some men every now and again. So I might bring people in that I know, I bring friends in, I might call Jeff, but why? Is it because like tokenism, so I can say, well, we had a man this morning? No. The reason is that we're better when we're gender diverse in our context, right? We're better when, if I leave one morning or if I leave with somebody else, that the guys in our congregation see themselves up there in a leadership role. Like that matters to me to build a bridge as I lead the people in our church. You know what I mean? So that's really how the mindset even of leading in a diverse environment, like, not about quotas, right? Because quotas and people, they should never be in the same situation, not with stuff like this ever, because that's when everybody feels like a token. But it's consideration is what it is. It's what Paul talks about, one body, many parts. that people are being considered, you know? Like, I want you on my team because we're better when there's a Filipino woman on it, and not just, you know, me and a white guy. You know, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But man, aren't we better when she's on the team with us too? Because she brings something that neither one of us can bring. Like, that's the heart behind it, is like, when you're not here, something's missing. You know, something very rich and very good is missing.
So I imagine your staff is the same. In other words, the pastoral staff and/or other leaders, elders, yes?
Yes, our staff is very diverse, ethnically, and we pray a lot that God will bring us the right people, because our desire is that it would be diverse. We don't go looking for, okay, you know, we don't have a Chinese person on the staff, so we need to go find a Chinese person. We don't do that. That's not how we approach it, but we are really aware of how we're hiring people in part of the mix. What I also know is when there is a lack of diversity, that we find other ways to infuse it. For instance, a couple of years ago, our elder board, which is all guys, awesome guys, they said, hey, you know, we don't have any elders that are women, and you know, our church is at the stance where I don't believe that women can be elders in church. I don't think so. But anyway, they said, but what we do know is that it's really important that we get the perspective of the women in our congregation. So they developed what we call an elders panel of women or something like that. Who weren't elders of the church, but anytime the elders had something that they wanted some female perspective on, they called up this group of ladies and said, hey, can we just talk to you for, you know, just for perspective? That's all. And sometimes, even like racially, say if one of your teams is all whatever, right? Or maybe it's age, right? Maybe it's all of your people on your team are over 50. Well, you may not be able to deploy someone that's 13, right? Or 14, but it doesn't mean their perspective is not valuable. So you might say, well, we're going to go, you know, this group of students once a month to share with them what we're doing and get their perspective so that we have a holistic idea of what's going on. So you gotta like find ways. So that's kind of how the culture of thinking goes at our church. And I gotta tell you, it's awesome. It just feels like we're honoring people. You know, it feels like we're going after people. It feels like we're being intentional about the way that we love people, even though we still have flawed systems. But that's what we're learning. So, anybody else? Anything burning? Deep burning? No? Okay. What time do I have?
12:05.
Hey, look at that! It's like it, right? Okay. Man, that was great. Cool. I really, really wanted you to hear from my guys. I'm sorry that I didn't do that. They're like, really, it's fine. Yeah, so consider this an open invitation for you to visit Bridgeway. I would love to have you there, and we're only like an hour and a half away. So please come visit. And please, if you can, come back to the concert tonight, because we're going to be playing music and playing some fun stuff and telling some stories about the music, and you might sing along too, who knows. But please feel free. Please feel free to keep in contact with me if you like. I actually like that. I'm highly relational. So like if you shoot me an email or something, I'm not going to be like, what group is this person? No, I love it. So feel free to contact me. We've got some music out there, buy some music and stuff. But really, thank you for the time, and thank you for listening and allowing us to be a part of your community today. So,
Are you on Facebook?
I am on Facebook, yes. Find me, please. Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. So, I am on Instagram, yes. So you can find me. But anyway, thank you all so much. May God be with you.